Hello, let's talk about the Fast and the Furious. So the whole series, the whole Shibuki. Let's talk about it. So today we will be talking about 1 through 5, and then we'll do it part 2. That's 6 to 10, and Hobbs and Shaw, the only spinoff so far, will get its own little video. But let's do this thing, and that's the plan. It's 3 videos. Let's do it. So, Fast and Furious 1. Oh, I guess a little history. I usually do that. A little history and a little prelude. I've never seen these films. I remember like a small pocket of kids back in middle school back in 2011 who referenced this film in front of me, but I never saw these films until I got into high school or until I got into college. My grandparents on my mom's side love these films, and you know what? I love them too. I love them when they're goofy, when they're comical, and when they're really good action films. Having problems, and we'll get to them, stuff like that. So sort of like what I did with MCU, and last summer what I did with The Evil Dead, I will be talking about these films for basically 4 minutes a piece. It was gonna be 5, but now it's 4 minutes a piece. I'll try to say my piece on these rather quickly, but I won't try to rush through them. But I will be more adherent to the 4 minute window than I was last summer. That was just sort of the Evil Dead review was just sort of me pushing the limits to see what my old phone could still do. But now we can talk forever, how long we want. But I'll try to keep this under 30 minutes. So let's talk about it. I'll wait for it to change to 2. But yeah, so the original Fast and the Furious, this film is about Brian O'Connor, played by, forgive me, Paul Walker. He is an undercover police officer, and it's basically Point Break with cars, except it's a million times better than Point Break. Point Break is, I think, the worst Keanu Swayze film I've seen from both actors, respectively. But this film is really good. It's relatively goofy. It has that early 2000s cheese to it. It's a relatively goofy crime drama about Brian befriending Dominic Toretto, played by Vin Diesel, and they become friends in this film very slowly. They are, of course, rivals at first, but then they do become friends, and it's just fun. You get this evil guy who's very much a kind of one-note villain. I don't really remember his name. Oh, Tran. You get this guy. His name's Tran. He's a Chinese person that a hoodlum that Vince or that Dom works for and stuff like that. And yeah, he's just a jerk, and you have Dom have to deal with him. Brian is trying to track down who has been stealing basically DVDs from trucks, and that leads him to Dom. He also leads him to Maya, and Maya's his love interest in the film. You have Letty, and these are all basically tough guy characters who act tough, and it's about racing, kind of. There's not too much racing, but it's just a cool movie where you see attractive people and cool cars, and stuff like that. A problem I do have with this first film is that it just kind of ends. This is a problem that you'll face when you go back and watch older movies, like Tron, for example, just ends. Independence Day just ends, and I feel like I've talked about this before, but certain old movies just kind of ended, and this ends too, on a bit of an unsatisfactory note, and the climax is very lackluster, especially when you compare it to the first film, or to the later films. But there's a lot of fun, practical car stunts. This series is kind of the Mission Impossible for cars, almost. Now, granted, there are eventually later in the series gonna be car stunts that are obviously CGI, and like, it's not really as impressive, but it's ultimately pretty fun. And I think it sort of knows that a it's a crime drama that has cars, and that was, especially in 2001, unique enough to make this film kind of pop and stand out. This movie made stars out of its two main actors, and while the two main actors, I don't think really ever found, Vin Diesel and Paul Walker, I don't think they ever really found success outside of this franchise. They most certainly did a good job at being entertaining and this film did a good job at being entertaining and being fun. This film actually, I don't know if this is true, but fun fact, this movie was made in like 1999 and got shelved for like a year because Universal wasn't confident that it would be a big moneymaker. And that's something I learned like a year ago, and I was just like, oh, I'll have to keep that in mind, because yeah, doing this review has been on the docket for like a while. Next is Too Fast, Too Furious. So Too Fast, Too Furious is about Brian O'Connor. He is, still played by Paul Walker, but he has moved on from the events of the first film, now lives in Miami, which I think which maybe is where he's from. I know he's from Arizona maybe, but like I think he's also from, or he was living in Miami at some point prior to the first film, I think. But this film is about him taking on this drug dealer guy, and this drug dealer guy is getting money, transferring drugs from Miami to Cuba, or to just in general like the South American area. And Brian and his friend Roman Pierce are tapped to basically take this guy down. And it's very similar, interestingly enough, to Bad Boys 2. I guess after 9/11, there actually was a problem with drugs getting in from South America into Miami. A little history for you, I guess, if that's in fact true, and not just something we've made up for like 2 movies in 2003. But yeah, it's fun. This film, hopefully I'll put this more elegantly than I did last summer with Mission Impossible 2, but this kind of has like the same premise almost as Mission Impossible 2. Our main character is tapped to take down a guy who's, generally speaking, doing something bad, and there's a beautiful, attractive, dark-skinned lady sort of, in peril that our hero has to save. And that feels kind of generic, but like that also might be slightly a problem with both respective 2s, Mission Impossible 2 and this 2. But yeah, it's just fine. Like, it's a sort of middle of the road Fast and Furious movie. It does have those corny jokes, and I love the way that Paul Walker delivers the line, "Don't worry about it, cuz." Like, it is very goofy. It is very silly, and I think that kind of almost works to this film's advantage, that it's, silly and goofy. But it's also it has a lot more early 2000s like sort of cheese to it than the original film, and I think this lighter tone contributes to this being one of the middle of the road Fast and Furious films. But it's ultimately fun and entertaining, and I think the director, who unfortunately passed away apparently in 2019, John Singleton, I forget his first name, but he does, I think he did a good job. Also, his commentary, he says like the F word like 3 times, and it's not censored at all. I was very surprised. But like, I think he does a good job at making this simplistic sort of story be fun and entertaining. He talks a lot about in the commentary, and you can sort of see this in the film, that he never wanted this film to be boring for a second. He always wanted to end a scene on some sort of like satisfactory note, whether that be a joke or a plot beat or an action beat. Something was always happening inside the scenes that he was directing, and yeah, that provides a fun movie that is, like I said, middle of the road. Generally speaking, not that middle of the road is bad, but it is just an entertaining film. Next is the sort of black sheep of the series, Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. So this film, I actually kind of like it. It's pretty good. Justin Lin, this is his first film in this franchise. First of, like, I think he's done 5. I think he's the only guy to direct 5 of these. And you want to know what? I think he did a good job with this, especially this being his first foray into the action genre. This was like his second movie ever, and like he did a good job. The best thing I think about this film, before we even get to the premise, is the opening credits. The opening credits has a mid 2000s sort of punk pop song or punk rock song called 6 Days. And it's a song about the mediocrity of life, and it's being played over Sean, our main character, who's probably the worst protagonist of this whole series. It was shown in his very mundane Alabama life that he's just doing the mundane. He's just going through his routine at school. He doesn't really care about anything or seems to be interested in anything other than cars. We see him almost stand up for a fat kid who's getting spray painted on in auto class, and he stands up, sees what's going on, sees the teacher's not going to do anything about it, and then he just walks away. He is not interested in anything, and then he moves to Tokyo, and his whole world pops up, baby. Like, there's a girl he's interested in. He's getting friends in this, little Bow Wow. He's getting Han, who is a very central character in this franchise almost by happenstance. And like, you see this kid, and of course, I don't think the actor playing Sean really does this character much help. I think they should have maybe gotten a different actor. But like, you see this mundane kid develop a personality over the course of the film, and it actually is, I'll give this film some credit, that's a good character arc. But this is, I think, kind of also just another one of the middle of the road films in this franchise. It's not bad, it's not good, it's just kind of there. I think the idea of Tokyo drifting, and of course basically making this a sports movie that's actually about drifting, actually about racing, is really cool, and it's really fun. You can tell that Justin Lin, kind of maybe by happenstance, knows how to film a car, and the actors really learned how to drift. Even the dude from frickin' Home Improvement learned how to drift, if you watch the bonus features. And like, it's actually really cool and really impressive. And there's some fun moments in this film. This film is about Sean, troubled kid, moving to Japan with his dad, in the Navy, and he ends up discovering a world far beyond what he could possibly imagine. And Han, I think, is a good character. He's a bit one note. I don't think he ever really changes throughout this or his other appearances, unfortunately. But the actor playing Han is great. And a problem I do have with this film is that it's supposed to take place in 2015, thanks to the other films in this chronology. But it just absolutely boggles my mind that they didn't have the foresight to maybe make this film feel a bit more futuristic, because they're using flip phones. This is obviously 2006, but it's just very annoying. And this film, or this whole franchise, is full of sort of bad type of ideas in terms of continuity, in terms of leaps of logic, ultimately. Whew, there you go. Maybe I should have made it. Maybe I should have made these 5 minutes, baby. Next is Fast and the Furious, Fast and the Furious 4, Fast 4, although I thought about calling these F9, F whatever. I guess I forgot about that, but Fast and Furious, this film, forgive me, I almost forgot to turn on the timer. This film is a reboot. This is essentially a hit the refresh button on your computer, on in the franchise. Brian is back. He's an FBI agent after the events of 2. He got recruited. And of course, Dom is back, and he is jacking cars, or he's jacking fuel tankers to get the fuel off of them. And that was their status quo. And then, of course, unfortunately, Letty dies trying to get Dom a pardon. She dies working for basically a drug smuggler, and now Dom has to go back to Los Angeles and figure out who the hell Braga is and kill him. And of course, Brian is also trying to figure out who Braga is. And Braga is the worst villain of this entire series. He's literally just this is gonna, I don't know how to otherwise phrase this. He's just a short Latino guy with no real presence. His henchman, the guy who plays Mother's Milk in The Boys, has more of a presence in this film than Braga, the main villain, and it sucks. He's just a short guy, not scary at all. But I think this film highlights what's so great about this series and what was sort of missing from 2 and 3, that being the Brian and Dom relationship. Those two characters being together is, I think, the key tenet of this series, of this franchise. You want to see these two dudes hang out together, and that's because Brian, or Paul Walker and Vin Diesel were actually friends in real life. It's really cool and really exciting. And this film, unfortunately, kind of sits at the bottom for me. It's just a generic crime movie, that's all it is. It doesn't have the goofy charm. It doesn't have the witty dialogue, just the witty characters that the rest of the series has, that the rest of the franchise has. It's just a generic crime movie, and that sucks. And it especially is compounded by the fact that the villain is so lame. And I don't know, it's a good refresh. It's nice to see Brian and Dom together. It's nice to see Mia again. It has some cool car stunts, even though there are some things that I think were maybe aided by CG. But it's just, unfortunately, a generic action film with these characters. And I don't know, I like that future films don't try to do this darker tone, because I think this darker tone, this more serious crime film that it's trying to be, just doesn't work for the franchise. And I think it's better when you lean into your characters, when you lean into the comedy that comes with them and the goofiness that comes with the idea that cars can, fly off a cliff in 50 feet in the air and land safely on rocks and stuff. That's the beauty of this franchise, the beauty of this series. And yeah, it's nice. And I like it fair enough, but it is most certainly at the bottom. I'm gonna bump this up to 5 minutes for this one. Fast 5. Fast 5. So sometime after Brian, Mia help Dom escape imprisonment. They find themselves now wanted, but small wanted, not wanted, until unfortunately they get tricked into working for a guy named Reyes, who's one of the better, at least in this first 5, probably the best villain of this series. He is the three of them are kind of tricked into working for Braga, and Braga kind of Reyes, and Reyes sort of pins the murder of two federal agents on them, U.S. federal agents on them, and they're like, okay, why did this guy want to steal this particular GT model? Well, it turns out that it has, you know, money, locations for money that they want, that the characters are now going to try to steal. And yeah, Hobbs shows up. Hobbs being played, of course, by The Rock. And he's very no nonsense. He's very much, I don't care who you are. I don't care why you were on my list. I'm going to take you down and capture you. Your mistake was thinking you had a goddamn choice, boy. That kind of a character. And yeah, it works, and The Rock, I think, plays that tough boy, that hard boy rather well. And of course, this film has the goofiness. This film has two Dodge Chargers, or Challengers, two Dodge Challengers, dragging a bank vault through the streets of Rio. It has the comedy. Tej, unfortunately, he got up, Ludacris got upgraded from being just the guy who can organize races to being the technological savvy dude. I think Earl from Tokyo Drift, if he wasn't a teenager and he wasn't supposed to be a character from the future of this series, I think he actually could have played the Tej character better than Ludacris. Ludacris he isn't believable as a techie. Of course, you get Roman Pierce back. Gal Gadot is in this film. This is sort of her, I think, American film debut. And of course, Han is back. And yeah, it's ultimately just a fun movie. It's light, it's goofy, it's fun. And I think it sort of has the right amount of the right ingredients being put together. But I do think that it starts off. This film is like 2 hours and 11 minutes long, and it kind of feels that way. It feels very much, it doesn't really have pacing problems, but the first 30 minutes or so just feel like, oh, we're gonna have another Fast and Furious movie, and then it starts to change, starts to pivot into what this franchise will truly become. And I think that pivot works. It's just that this is the pivot movie, and I think that it being the pivot movie almost hurts it in a way, because this is a fun and enjoyable film. This is a lot of people's number one favorite, and this is most certainly in my top 5. But the ingredients aren't right yet. The amount of ingredients. You're not quite there yet, and it's nice. Also, by the way, Vin Diesel and The Rock had a clause where they couldn't lose. Hobbs and Dom could fight, but they couldn't lose. Dominic totally won that fight, by the way. And you have the return, at least in my opinion, he won that fight. He sort of dealt the final blow in that battle before getting arrested. And then of course you have Vince back, and he just kind of sucks. There's kind of a weird redemption moment with him, and it just kind of feels like, oh, you want this guy to be redeemed in the eyes of the universe because we're family. And this is the first film that really has that. I know that we're family is a thing that they say in these movies. It's a thing that we parody, we make fun of with these films. The first film aren't really that way. The first 4 aren't that way. 5 is when the whole we're family starts to come into play. And I think it's a nice change. It's I think what makes this franchise special, and I think 5 is when this series really gets cooking. And I think there's a stretch of films in this series that we'll cover, of course, and that I'll bring up, that is very much a way of, yeah, this is when the ingredients, this is when the cooking, this is when the stew was popping, and this is the beginning of that. And like I said, I love all these films. I have my criticisms of them. but these are all 11 of them are fun and have their moments. I just have certain little things that I like to nitpick that bother me. One of them is the timeline thing. So, real quick, for those who don't know, there is actually a chronological order. Granted, I don't think anyone ever watches these films that way, but there is a chronological order to these. It goes 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 3, 7, 8, 9, 10. After 6, you watch 3, and then you watch 7, basically. And granted, these films weren't made that, or weren't like created that way. They probably have never been watched that way, but it is most certainly something that's kind of noticeable, especially when obviously Tokyo in 2006 is supposed to be 2015. Just kind of, generally speaking, sucks that it's that way. I love Han, but like I said, he's just kind of baseline one note because he kind of can't be different than he is in 3, so we just make him consistent, and that sucks a little bit. But come back, I believe, in a few days for when I review, or for when I do part 2, when I review the next 5, all that good stuff. I'll still got the shirt on, but yeah, that's it for now. Comment below, let me know what you think of these first 5. Do you love them? Do you hate them? Thank you so much for getting to the end of this video. Remember that God made you special. He loves you very much. I hope you have a very lovely day, and as always, God bless y'all, and remember, be nice to your family.